Awesome. Thank you so much. Guys, thank you. Sorry we're getting started a little late, but I am here to talk to you about scaling your law firm and doing that by implementing EOS, the Entrepreneur's Operating System. So I want to just kind of start by telling you, I used to run, and I still own, a fractional CFO company named CAFCAP. And we started really paying close attention to our clients' performance, not just revenue, not just profit, but really how firms were progressing once they started working with us. And over time, we noticed something kind of interesting. You could take our clients and kind of divide them into three buckets. There was bucket A, and these were the people that just really kind of took off, like high and to the right. Think hockey stick results. They made decisions quickly and their results showed up really fast. Then there was bucket B. And these people, you know, they were making nice, steady progress. It wasn't explosive like bucket A, but it was healthy, it was meaningful, and it was steady. So we were pretty happy with that. And then there was bucket C. And frankly, we were really frustrated by bucket C because you really couldn't even tell they were working with us. And that was frustrating for us. It had to be frustrating for them. We felt like we weren't giving them a good return on their investment. So naturally, we did what any good CFO would do. We're a bunch of data-driven girls. We started digging into the data. And we went looking for the variable. And what we asked was, what are we doing differently with the firms in bucket A than we are from the firms in bucket C? Are we giving better advice? Are we using different tools? Are we giving them more attention? And what we discovered really surprised us. We were giving them the same strategic advice, the same tools, the same options, the same amount of time. The difference wasn't us. The difference was the firms. Bucket A executed and bucket C didn't. And that sent us down another layer. So we dug deeper into all the firms in bucket A, and what we found there really changed everything for us. Because with one exception, every single firm in bucket A was running on EOS. Not accidentally, not casually. They had all selected an operating system that created accountability and execution. And it really didn't surprise us because we were running on EOS and we knew how great it could be. But it was stark to see that kind of result in front of us with all these law firms. And they chose it not because it was trendy, but because, you know, it was good. And now we had proof and we knew it worked and we knew that it drove execution. And we knew that execution separated firms that grew from firms that stayed stuck. And it was in that moment that EOS became our #1 outgoing referral at CAFCAP. I believe that every law firm deserves a system that creates accountability and execution, so you don't have to rely on heroics and hope. And my belief in EOS is what really pulled me out of my CFO company full-time and into what I'm doing now. And it's why I care so much about how EOS gets implemented in law firms. So over the next, I don't know, about 40 minutes, I'll leave some time for questions. I want to share with you 3 things. I want to tell you why EOS works when it works, why it sometimes quietly fails in law firms, and how to make sure your firm ends up in bucket A and not bucket C. So let's start with the first topic, which is why EOS works. Most people will tell you that small law firms struggle because they need better people, better delegation, or even better time management. I will tell you that most small law firms struggle because execution breaks, and there's nothing there to replace it. So I want to talk about it today because when execution breaks, eventually everything else follows. So let's go back to the buckets. Bucket C firms weren't missing advice. They weren't missing tools. They weren't missing effort. They were missing a system that made execution inevitable. And in small law firms, execution rarely collapses overnight. It's something that erodes. So I want to show you what broken execution or eroding execution looks like in the real world. And it's kind of a puzzle. There are a bunch of pieces that go to it. One is that decisions slow down. It takes longer for things to get done. Ownership becomes unclear. Is this yours or is this mine? Who can make this decision? The same issues, the same problems keep resurfacing month after month after month after month. And the biggie, everything still keeps going back to the owner or one or two partners, and they become a big bottleneck. And this is the point where the firm becomes dependent on heroic lawyering. And heroic lawyering feels really noble. There you are, you're the attorney, you're making the decisions, you're moving everything forward, you're saving the day, and then you're exhausted. Heroic lawyering works when firms are small, but as you start to grow, it's unsustainable. Heroics hide accountability gaps. They mask broken decision making. And the longer you do it, the longer you delay real structure. The firm looks fine from the outside, but inside, execution is just getting tougher and tougher every year. Bucket A firms don't rely on heroics. They create clarity around who owns those decisions. They know how issues get resolved, and they know what actually matters right now. Execution can't depend upon personality or even willpower. It cannot rest on one person to drive execution. It's not fair to that one person. It has to be built into how the firm operates. So I want to tell you about something that I see often when I go into firms. They look on paper like bucket B, right? They've got good revenue, they've got good people, there aren't any major crises. But every time I sit in on leadership meetings, I notice the same pattern. Every issue eventually comes back to the partners for them to solve. The hiring decisions, the process questions, client escalations, even things that they had already delegated to other people to get done, somehow ended up back in their laps for them to sign off on. Basically, nothing moved in the firm until a partner weighed in. So what I do is I have them do a really simple exercise. I have the firm map out every recurring issue that the firm is dealing with or has dealt with recently. And I ask one simple question: who actually owns this? Not who should own this problem, not who used to own this problem, but who owns it today. And then who has the authority to decide and move it forward. What we found was really telling. Most issues technically belong to somebody on the team, but in practicality, the person with the authority to decide and move it forward was generally a partner. There's something we say in EOS all the time, and that's when two people own it, nobody owns it. So there was no clear ownership, no clear decision rights, and no consequences if something stalled out. So the result is that execution stalls. So I'm really big on people leaving my presentations and my webinars with a few actionable items that you can go home and implement before the end of the week and see change in your firm. So if you saw yourself or your firm in anything that I've kind of said so far, here are two things you can do that will allow you to kind of start to take off that hero cape. The first is what I described in that story when I go into law firms. Write down all the problems, figure out who owns them, and figure out who can make the decisions on them. And that should be really, really illuminating for you. The second thing is a little harder, and that's to create an accountability chart. And when I say an accountability chart, it's different from an organizational chart because it is a chart of the roles or the seats that your firm really needs to operate at its best. And the 5 roles that each of those seats needs to deliver, the 5 things that each person would need to deliver for your firm to run its best. If you compare that to what you actually have, the difference between the two is generally pretty stark. And it's going to show you if you have a structural problem. Now, this is the point where firms go either one of 2 ways. They either see all of this and they double down on heroics and they're like, I'm going to muscle through and get it done. Or they install a system that allows them to execute and allows the whole firm to execute. And that system, when done right, is EOS. And before we talk about why EOS sometimes fails, I want to make sure that you guys understand what EOS is. I want to make sure that we're talking about the same thing. So EOS is the entrepreneurial operating system. Despite its name, it is not software. It's not a binder, and it's not just a meeting cadence. EOS is built on the belief that there are 6 key components of your firm that need to work together if the firm's going to run well. And if we can strengthen each of those 6 key components, then, you know, that's our goal. And our goal isn't to make everything perfect. Nothing's ever going to be perfect. That's just not going to happen. And there's no reason to try to grade ourselves that way. But if we can get it to 80% strong, if 8 out of 10 times we can get it right, your firm really does become unstoppable. So this is the EOS model, and I want to walk you through the 6 different components so that you can see what they are and how they all work together. So the first component is vision. And this is where you have a clear vision of where you want the firm to go. Very often, the owner of the firm has a clear vision. Occasionally, the rest of the leadership team does. Once in a blue moon, everybody who works in the firm does. We need everybody to understand where the firm is headed. We do that by answering 8 questions that are on what we call the VTO, the Vision Traction Organizer. Once we know where we're going as a firm, once the leadership team has established that, then we share it with everybody in the firm. Because if people don't see the same destination, they're going to wander off in random directions. Vision is what creates alignment, and execution is always harder than it needs to be if you don't have alignment. All right, let's talk about the second one, and that's people. You can't build a great firm without great people, and everybody defines great people differently. And so a lot of people get frustrated with this. We have gone to Jim Collins and borrowed his theory about putting the right people in the right seats. The right people are people that are a core values match for your firm. They're a culture match. The right seats are people who are good at what they do, they like doing it, and they want to be in that role. You can have a great person in the wrong seat, and you're going to struggle because they don't have the skill set to do the job. You can have the wrong person in the right seat, and man, they're going to execute the heck out of that seat. They're going to do really well at that job. They're going to be kind of a terror to have in the office. And that is actually more dangerous. So the people component is really about getting clarity, not judgment. Who's right? What is it that we need? The next one, this one that's near and dear to my heart, it's data. I'm a recovering CFO. I mean, you can't expect anything else. And in fact, Gina Wickman, who founded EOS, wrote on one of the covers of my books that if you need to strengthen your data component, Brooke Lively is the person to do it. So I love digging into this one. So I'll try to keep it brief. We have a lot of data these days. It used to be that we didn't have enough data, and now it's actually the opposite problem. Now we have too much data. So really what we're looking for are what are the 5 to 15 numbers that you can look at on a weekly basis that will give you a pulse on what's happening in your firm, that will tell you what's going to happen in the future. We don't want to drown you in data, but we want to help you make decisions faster and then not revisit them later because you're confident in the decision you've made. I don't know how many of you have done this, but have you ever made a decision at 2 in the afternoon and then you go home and you're having dinner with your family and you're like, I don't know, is that what I should have done or should I have gone the other way? And then you wake up at 3 a.m. and you think, all right, I'm definitely going to go into the office tomorrow morning and I'm going to change that. And then, you know, you get into the office and you're in the middle of a deposition and you're thinking about that. That's totally unproductive. We want you to be able to make quick decisions based on something besides your gut instinct. Clarity beats complexity every time. The fourth component is issues. And I talked about this a little earlier. Issues are going to crop up in your firm. If we cannot solve the issues, you're never going to get anywhere. So when we talk about issues, there are 2 things that we really want to do here. The first is get them on a list somewhere. Don't embarrass people about it. Don't make it a bad thing for people to bring up problems and issues. Celebrate it. Let's get it on the list, because if we know what it is, we can start to solve the problem. The second thing we do is what's called IDS. identify, discuss, and solve. And this is how we actually solve those problems at the root. We identify the root cause of the problem because most of the time people are actually solving the symptom, which means that the problem comes back in a couple of weeks, just with a different person's name on it. Then we discuss that issue. We discuss the problem, and then we solve it once and for all for the greater good of the firm. And that usually looks like somebody making a commitment saying, I will do this by a particular date. And then it's solved and it doesn't come back. And that is huge because every time you knock down one of those problems, it moves your firm forward. The fifth component is process. And kind of been talking about process today. EOS believes you need to identify, simplify, and document the core processes of your firm. And when I say this, people immediately see, like, I don't know, a giant binder this wide with reams of paper and everything documented, you know, with like an arrow pointing to the enter key, hit enter, then go here and then do that. That's not what EOS believes. We think you need to document the 20% of the processes that drive 80% of the work in your firm. That's all. This is not as heavy a lift as you think it is. The part that's harder is to make sure everyone in your firm follows those processes every time, the first time, because that's what makes a firm run better. That's what makes it more profitable. And honestly, that's what makes a firm more enjoyable to work for, because you stop reworking things. You stop having the same conversations over and over about why it wasn't done the right way. And you stop, you know, harping on people and correcting people. And the firm becomes a much more positive place and more profitable in the bargain. So we gotta love that. The last one is traction. And this is really where we take vision and we bring it down to the ground to execute on it. Gino Wickman says that vision without traction is a hallucination. And, you know, traction is about accountability. It's about execution. It's about people delivering on what they said they would do. It's about getting everybody in the firm rowing in that same direction at the same time, moving toward that one vision that you already shared in your VTO. This is where EOS lives or dies. We do it through giving people rocks. So these are quarterly projects. And through having a regular meeting pulse where people can make sure and monitor that everybody's on track and everyone is delivering on their commitments. It's that simple. So that's EOS at a really high level. It's simple, it's logical, it's incredibly effective. And that brings us to the next question. If EOS is this straightforward, why does it work so well in some law firms and fall flat in others? Well, here's where a lot of firms get it wrong. There's a window of opportunity where EOS works really well in law firms. And then there's a much larger window where it quietly stops working. Not because EOS is flawed, but because law firms treat it like it's optional. Once execution breaks, it doesn't announce itself. It just slowly disappears. So if you think back to the buckets, bucket A, B, and C, this is how firms slip from bucket A into bucket B into bucket C. They don't stop believing in EOS. They don't throw it out. They don't abandon it. They just stop protecting the execution. And they default back to heroic lawyering. And that creeps back into the firm. So the most common way that EOS fails is this. It gets treated like a project instead of the way the firm actually runs or operates. Court deadlines take priority, client work gets shuffled to the top, and EOS becomes one of those things that we'll do it when we have time. And once EOS becomes optional, accountability really disappears. Now, you can't tell a judge you missed a deadline because you were working on your EOS project. And you can't pause client work because, ooh, I gotta catch up on some of my EOS stuff. EOS has to be integrated into the practice of law, not layered on top of it. When it's layered on top, meetings drift. Rocks kind of roll off track. Issues get recycled, meaning you keep solving the same one over and over and over and over. And partners quietly take things back over. It's not a discipline problem. It's actually a design problem. So I've worked with a lot of firms and they tell me, we do EOS, right? We've got that. We've got the language. We've got the tools. We even have completed our VTO, our Vision Traction Organizer. But when I look closer, execution tells a slightly different story. The rocks aren't getting completed, they just keep getting extended to next quarter. Issues, they're identifying the issue-ish. They're definitely identifying the symptom. They're discussing the heck out of it, but nothing's really getting solved. And accountability is still living with the same two partners. So I ask a simple question. What happens when somebody doesn't deliver? And the answer is generally nothing. Maybe they get chewed out. Okay, well, that's not accountability, that's theater. Everybody is busy. Everybody has a reason. The EOS exists so that execution does not have to depend on heroic lawyering. Once accountability becomes non-negotiable, once you bring that back, traction returns, not overnight, but consistently. And you can start to go from bucket C to bucket B, making that nice steady progress, to eventually bucket A, which is where you really want to be. All right. Let's talk about next steps. These are things you can do this week. If you want execution to thrive in your firm, here are a couple of ideas for this week. Have what EOS calls an L10 meeting, a level 10 meeting. We call it a level 10 because you rate the meeting at the end on a scale of 1 to 10. And we want this meeting to be worthwhile. To be worthwhile, this meeting has to be on the same day every week, at the same time. It has to start on time, end on time, and you use the same agenda every single week. The meeting doesn't get moved, and there are only two reasons for missing it. The first is you're on vacation, and the second is death. Your death, not just any death. The second thing you can do is sit down and really evaluate where you think your biggest execution points of failure are. Is it people not doing what they said they would? Is it that there aren't any processes to tell people how to do it? But sit down, think about all the problems that have been going on recently, and identify all the places where you have seen a lack of execution or follow through. And then look to see if you can find a pattern. If issues keep resurfacing, if accountability feels really personal or really awkward, then execution is still depending upon one person or on the partners. It's not based on a process. And the answer here is not more effort, it's a better structure. All right, let's talk about the last thing, how to actually get into the bucket you want to be in. Most firms think the difference between bucket A and bucket C is intelligence, motivation, effort. But the real difference is that bucket A firms don't find time to implement EOS. They create it. Execution doesn't disappear when people stop caring. Execution disappears when the firm gets busy and nothing is there to protect it. If you look at everything we've talked about so far, the buckets, the heroic lawyering, the way execution erodes, it all points to the same tension. And it's the biggest objection that I hear when I talk to law firms about implementing EOS. And that is, I don't have time. And on the surface, oh my gosh, that objection makes so much sense. Law firms are busy places. Clients don't stop calling. Judges don't move deadlines. Work doesn't just magically get done so that you have time to implement this. But here's what bucket A firms understand that the others don't. If you wait until you have time, your execution will never get fixed. So bucket A firms do three very specific things instead. The first is they stop letting everything be urgent. Bucket A firms are ruthless about urgency. They recognize that most things in a law firm feel urgent, but very few things are actually important. What is truly important? What is urgent? And what moves us forward? They separate what must be done today from what actually moves the firm forward. And they protect time for that second category, the moving the firm forward category. Charles Hummel calls it the tyranny of the urgent. And he said that the urgent drives out the important. And it's true. And the result is that if you're always dealing with the urgent, the important never gets done and the firm never moves forward. Bucket A firms accept some short-term discomfort to stop the long-term chaos. They address what's important, and that trade-off creates time down the line. The second thing they do is they push decisions down into the firm on purpose. Bucket C firms lose time because decisions keep coming back to the owners. Bucket A firms design the firm so that fewer decisions do that. They're explicit about what decisions do partners no longer make. What do they make and what don't they make? Who owns what? What happens when something stalls out? There have to be consequences. And this one is huge. What does done look like? Now, none of this eliminates work, but it does eliminate rework. And if you think about it, rework is where most partners' time is really spent. So if you can eliminate the rework, you open up so much time, especially for the leaders of the firm. Here's the third one. They solve issues once. And this is really the most underestimated time saver. Bucket A firms are relentless at solving issues at the root. If something comes up more than once, they stop and they fix it. They don't keep stepping over the same problem, week after week because, oh, this week, instead of stopping us or shutting us down for 3 hours, it only slowed us down for 2. They don't treat the symptom. How many times have you run into an issue or a problem and you're like, well, this is enough to get us by. This is a temporary fix. I'm from Texas. We call that using bubble gum and baling wire. The rest of the world says it's basically throwing some duct tape on it and tossing it in the corner and hoping that it stays okay for a while. Don't kick it down the line. Bucket A firms don't do that. They find the permanent solution to the root problem because they understand that unresolved issues quietly tax time every single day. And solving them once creates additional capacity permanently. All right, so I told you that I hear often partners say, we'd love to do EOS, but we just don't have the time. And they're right. Their calendars are full, but when I look closer, there's something that stood out. They were leaking a lot of time because they were spending hours revisiting the same decisions over and over. They kept answering the same stupid questions, and they were solving the same issues over and over and over and over again. The firms that executed, the firms that put EOS in place, the firms that made the time didn't actually make the time. They didn't actually get more time. They just stopped leaking it. Once the urgency was clarified, decisions were pushed down and recurring issues were actually solved. The leadership work stopped feeling like an extra burden, and it became what gave them their time back. All right, you guys are figuring this out. This is the third time we've done this. Next steps, things that you can execute. So if I don't have time is an objection for you, here are 2 things you can do to, create more of it. The first is stop tolerating issues. Ask yourself, what problems am I tolerating that I should have solved already? And then go solve them. And the second is use the Eisenhower matrix. So for those of you that don't immediately lock into what the Eisenhower matrix is, let me remind you. It's a 2x2 matrix. You've got urgent on one axis and you've got important on the other. If something is urgent and important, These are things like crises, deadlines, true emergencies. You got to deal with them. If it is important but not urgent, these are things like strategy, leadership, systems, prevention. Urgent but not important. This is interruption. This is noise. This is other people's priority. Coming in and you taking it on. What's the phrase? You know, not my monkey, not my circus. How many times have you taken on another employee's problem and solved it for them? Stop taking their monkeys. Let them keep their monkey on their back. You don't need it. And then the one that really gets me is neither urgent nor important. These are the distractions. If you use the Eisenhower matrix, if you are relentless and you use it in every aspect of what you do, you will see incredible progress, because leadership lives in the important but not urgent quadrant. The urgent will always win unless something protects it. All right, so I want to take a minute here and I want to do an exercise. And just so you know, I'll explain the exercise in a second, but I'm going to take questions here. I don't know how much time I have. And I'm happy to stay later on the webinar to answer any questions that people may have.
No questions in yet, Brooke.
Okay, great. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to think about all the things we've talked about today and make a list. What are the 3 things that you can do when you walk away today? Do you need to make a list of all of your problems and see who owned them? Do you need to implement the Eisenhower matrix? We actually did that in our firm, and we rate everything on a scale of 1 to 5 for urgency and importance. And you just pick the right number. It's been awesome. What are the things that you can do that will help you with your execution? I want you to think about that for just a second. And then I'm going to go ahead and answer the question that I get asked the most often. And that is, you know, Brooke, what is this magical L10 meeting that you talked about? And why do people find it to be one of the most valuable things in EOS? And I'll tell you, here is a copy of the agenda. It is very simple and very structured. You start out with a segue and you ask, what's the best business from the last week? What's the best personal piece of news from the last week from each person? What this does is it helps you move from working in the business to working on the business. Then you go over your scorecard, those 5 to 15 numbers. We don't discuss if we're on track or off track. We just say on track or off track. If you are off track and it needs to be discussed, we drop it down. I'll tell you what that means in a second. Then we review our rocks. These are our 90-day initiatives, those things that we want to get done, those priorities, those important things that are moving the firm forward. Are we on track or off track? Again, not a discussion, just reporting. If you want to talk about it, we drop it down. Customer and employee headlines. Again, this is reporting out. You know, Jane's going on maternity leave on Tuesday. She'll be gone for 6 weeks. This client fired us, and we have a new attorney starting next week. Again, no discussion. And then we go over the to-do list. And I'll tell you where the to-do list comes from in a second, but Are the to-dos done? This is driving your accountability. Are people doing what they said they would do? 90% should be getting done every single week. And then we spend 60 minutes, the vast majority of the meeting, on IDS, on solving those problems. If there was an issue on the scorecard that you want to talk about it, this is where you talk about it. If there was a problem with a rock, this is where you talk about it. If we need to figure out why that client fired us or was upset, this is where you talk about it. This is where you solve the issue. And solving an issue looks like somebody doing something by some time, otherwise known as the to-do. That's how we solve problems for the long-term greater good of the firm. With about 5 minutes to go, we start to wrap up and conclude. We recap the to-do list so that everybody knows what their commitments are. We talk about if there are any messages we need to tell anybody else in the firm, cascade through the firm, and then we rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. And if it's not an 8 or higher, what can we do better next time so that it does become the most productive hour and a half of the week? All right, so we're running a little low on time. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up, but like I said, I'm going to be here if anyone has any questions in a minute. So one of the other common questions that I get after I do talks like this is, Brooke, can you help me? The answer is yes, but not actually in the way that most people expect. At the end of this presentation, I'm going to put up a QR code that connects you to a special scaling law link that will help you evaluate the health of your firm. Think back to those 6 key components that I talked about. This will help you evaluate where you're 80% strong and also identify where you might need some work. All right, and what that does is it gives you visibility into your firm to see exactly what it needs. It's, not theory, not generic advice, but it's real world guidance, and it's totally free. Just go in and do it. And what it means for you and your firm is really simple. It gives you a way to see how strong your firm is. And it also kind of, in some ways, pressure tests whether EOS might be right for you. And it gives you a way to move forward without guessing or drifting. Now, some of you might want to work with me directly. Some of you might want to go through me to find the right implementer. And some of you might want to implement, and that's awesome. I started out by self-implementing. And if that's you, I also have a new EOS-based community starting in just a couple of weeks, and that's a great way to dip your toe into EOS. It will have learning on it, there will be a community aspect, and we'll have webinars with experts coming in to teach things. So my point is, you don't have to figure out any of this alone. Oh, and there's one other thing. On February 24th, my book, Scaling Law, comes out. It is the only book that is written specifically about EOS for law firms. And in fact, EOS liked it so much that they're the ones that published it. All right. Now I want you to picture something. I want you to picture a day when you're no longer the bottleneck of every decision in your firm. I want you to picture a day when leadership meetings actually resolve things instead of recycling them. And I want you to picture a day when your firm runs really well, even when you're not in the office. That's not growth about growth. That's not about growth for growth's sake. That's about building a firm that can carry its own weight. So wherever you are right now, whether you just started a firm or you've had your firm for 30 years, whether you've never heard of EOS, or you've been running on it forever. My new book, Scaling Law, is going to give you a place to learn more about EOS. And if you know EOS is the right direction, I gave you all kinds of ways to implement it correctly. And if you're already implementing EOS, but you feel stuck, really sit down and look, because you're probably not protecting your execution. Remember, there is a path forward, and it doesn't require perfection, but it does require making a decision. So here is the QR code to go check out the health of your firm. And also, if you want to get in touch with me, the easiest way to reach me is brooke.lively@eosworldwide.com. And look at me, Alan, I've got 3 minutes.
Wow, Brooke. Let's see. I've got something. Let's see if it's a comment or a question. Oh, it is a question. Hold on. Hold on. I have to get it to you.
Oh, goody. Somebody has a question. I love questions.
Yeah. See, now when it's this long, I find it's just much preferable for me to actually put it in the chat for you, if that's okay.
Oh, that's great.
It's a lot to read. Yeah, that's what we've been doing these days, and it really works better. Hold on, here it comes.
All right. Holy cow, that is a long one. Okay, I'm going to read this out loud. I opted to manage workflow at my law firm because they fired the legal assistant, legal secretary 15 months ago, and urgency was ruling our days. Our firm members have not been able to complete their tasks due to being short-staffed, but it has helped quite a bit. I have weekly meetings and continue to try to adjust the workflow chart until and if they decide to rehire a new legal assistant or secretary. I am the litigation paralegal of the firm and have a master's degree in organizational leadership, management, and HR. Holy cow, that's helpful for your firm. The brunt of the work falls on me. Your tips will be tremendously helpful. Thank you. Oh, Sarah, I appreciate that. Does anybody have any questions or any problems that I can help you solve? Because, you know, especially the tyranny of the urgency, which is what Sarah was talking about, that is so difficult, because these days people are expensive, firms are slow to rehire, but people are also hard to find. I hear it all the time from the firms that I work with, both in my CFO company and in Scaling Law. They say we can't find a good attorney, we can't find a good paralegal. And so it takes a long time to replace people. And that's tough. So we all deal with that. So Sarah, thanks for everything you're doing. Hey, Alan, anybody else?
Well, no, I'm just going to make mention that the OLP sister company, Estrin Legal Staffing, actually has a division called Estrin VIP that specifically places attorneys and C-suite executives. So it's
that's the solution.
well, you know, we pride ourselves in taking on difficult situations and cases and getting them solved and getting the right people for the right job. So I just going to throw that in. It's Estrin Legal Staffing. Website is estrinlegalstaffing.com or estrinvip.com. Okay, Brooke. Well, I guess we brought it in.
Hold on, Alan.
Yeah,
hold
sure.
on. I want to go back to something you said. When you're working with the right partner to find people, it is so much easier, because as paralegals, as attorneys, as, you know, people who work in law firms, sourcing people is not that's not our specialty. That's not what we do. We're about delivering legal services. So partnering with someone who does specialize in recruiting and finding the right people makes an immense difference in the quality of people you find, and it significantly reduces the amount of time that it takes to find those people. So it's worth it.
Okay, well, thank you, Brooke. Yeah, I'm not a recruiter myself, but I am an executive within the company. But it really is a craft. And oh, here, something just came in. How do you get everyone on the same page? Recently hired people from different firms seem to have a problem getting on the same page as the rest of us.
So I don't know if you hired them as partners or as associates, but it really does come back to that VTO, that Vision Traction Organizer, and the 8 questions that get answered there. And those 8 questions are, what are your core values? What do you stand for? And what will you not stand for? What is your core purpose? Why do we get up every morning and do what we do? And what is it that we do? The combination of those we call the core focus. What is your 10-year target? Who is your ideal client? Not who will you take, but who are you really marketing to? What are the 3 things that set your firm apart? What are the 3 things that make you unique? And these 3 things, each of them may not be unique. It's the combination of the 3 that's unique. And that's really important to have in your messaging. And then, do you have a proven process? Do you show your clients what it is like to work with you? That sets expectations. It gives you much happier clients. And then, you know, do you make some kind of promise or pledge to your clients? You know, we promise to return phone calls in 24 hours. I don't know, I'm riffing here. And the last piece of this puzzle is, what is our 3-year picture? Where do we see ourselves in 3 years? And what does that really look like? Not just revenue or profit, but how many people will be working for us? What do our offices look like? Will we have changed our practice area at all? You want people to be able to like really almost touch, taste, feel, smell what the law firm's going to be in 3 years. When you come up with that as a leadership team, when you work together to create that, that's how you get your leadership team on the same page. From there, you roll it out to the rest of the team. And they then have a choice to make. They can either buy in and get on board, or frankly, we can find another firm for them where they might be a better fit. When we talk about culture, believing in that VTO, wanting to be a part of it, that's part of culture. That's part of finding your tribe, finding those right people. Does that help some? I hope.
Well, yes, Ashley says super helpful. Thanks so much. And Peter said, thanks so much. This was great. And since I have a bit of crosstalk in here now, I'm going to end. And thank you. Thank our attendees. And Brooke, we look forward to having you next time.
Well, thanks so much for letting me come on. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And goodbye for now. And we hope to see you all at the another OLP or Estrin legal staffing webinar. And have a great rest of your day. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.